When you go into the publishing industry, people tell you to keep your expectations low because most times it's not your first book that becomes your breakout success. As we kind of hit publication, just every single thing that happened, I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I was in my little dorm room and then my phone rings and I knew then that it had hit the New York Times list.
From writing at 13 to building a literary empire, Chloe Gong's story and advice are about ambition, identity, and finding balance in a world that never stops watching.
Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Today, we are speaking with Chloe Gong.
Her name is Chloe Gong.
Chloe Gong?
She's the author of young adult hits, These Violent Delights.
A New York Times best-selling author.
The youngest authors to achieve this prestigious feat.
You found success before most people find confidence. How did you handle that?
Oh, that is a great question. I learned how to grow a thick skin early. When I first started writing, I was 13 and I kind of just wanted people to read my work. The concept of having achieved success at a young age is something that, I am so grateful for. It is also very scary because there will always be that idea of like, well, can I ever reach another peak? Can I keep it going in a way, or am I just going to plateau at a certain point?
Oh my gosh. Starting a new book, Chloe, and project, I imagine, must feel like a lot. What are your tips for anyone listening for managing feelings of overwhelm and not getting paralyzed?
Whenever you have stepped into a whole new sandbox, it's terrifying because all the structures are gone. It is so much easier to do it one section at a time, one page at a time, one paragraph at a time, even one line at a time, and then eventually you're there.
Everyone needs to know that.
Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Welcome, Chloe.
Hello, so excited to be here.
Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
Thank you. We are so excited to have you. Anastasia and I, we are big readers and we love your books. And you are an incredible author who's super successful at a young age of multiple best-selling iconic books. And I know that you published your first book in college, which we're going to get to. But when and why did you actually start writing?
Great question. I always love talking about this because I feel like it almost seems like an unusual story when I tell it, but then you get a lot of other teenagers who hear that story and they're like, wait a minute, I'm kind of like that too. So I was such a big reader at first. When I was 13, there was such a big commercial boom in the young adult books fair, and that was amazing for me because I had no other hobbies. I loved reading so much that I was in the library every single week, and whatever I could find that looked interesting, I was just consuming in huge volume. And it got to a point where I was reading so much that I was running out of books to read. And, I had a moment of realization where I thought, what is it about these books that I find so enjoyable? It's the escapism. It's the ability to completely sink into another world. And for a few hours every day, I just feel like I'm someone else, I'm somewhere else, I'm going through some big adventure. And so when I found myself like with nothing to do one afternoon, I had this eureka moment of, I wonder if writing a book would feel the same as reading a book. I wonder if I will get that same thrill when I open a blank page and start doing my own world. And it did. It completely did. When I first started, I didn't think of it as something as serious as book writing. I just called it storytelling. I was writing my silly story that I did chapter by chapter by chapter. And then eventually I just realized, oh, I actually wrote a book. This is long enough to be a book. And here we are.
That is so incredible. And I really like how you described it as not being like, oh, I'm going to write a book. And instead you kind of framed it as storytelling because oftentimes I feel like it can be so easy to fall into that trap of, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to grind out 300 pages. Absolutely. And then all of a sudden it kind of comes like a trap. Like you feel like, you're committing to a huge project when in the end, again, you're just telling a story.
Yeah, I think that's such a great piece of advice for anyone listening who wants to write a book of some sort or story of some kind. It's just start a little bit at a time and don't put this huge pressure onto yourself. Instead, just kind of work at it a little bit at a time and see where it takes you.
Because it feels so much scarier to just say, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write the 300 pages. It's easier to understand what book writing really looks like when you just think, today I'm going to write 1 page. This week I'm going to write 1 chapter. And before you know it, it comes together in a way that, feels easier to manage.
Absolutely. I know that Anastasia and I, we don't have a book, but we have like a journal and like happiness activities and cards, and like even just doing like 3 cards a day to make up for 100, it's much less overwhelming than saying I'm going to make 50 cards today, 50 cards tomorrow, and they all have to be amazing and perfect by the first draft. I think then it's not going to be very good quality anyways, and also it's a lot of stress, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And now kind of flashing to the future, take us into your mind on how it felt to become one of the youngest New York Times best-selling authors at only 21.
It was wild. It was not expected, because I think when you go into the publishing industry, people tell you to keep your expectations low. Because most times it's not your first book that becomes your breakout success. It's not your first book that starts to, establish your career. It can take a lot of books. It can take a lot of years. And so my case was unusual, and I went into it not quite wanting to hope for that, because, I knew I was in it for the long haul. I wanted to write so many books over my career. I have so many stories that I wanted to tell, that when I debuted with my first ever book, I was like, I'm going to keep my expectations super low, because that means I'm either right or I'm pleasantly surprised if I'm proven wrong. And I think I succeeded in keeping my mental expectations low, but I think the world around me was also really hard to do. It was really hard to do the usual publishing industry kind of process at that time. My first book came out in November of 2020, which was a strange time. Most bookstores were closed. Most traditional methods of, discovering your latest read by just browsing the shelves, it wasn't feasible at that time. And so everyone who was debuting in 2020, they were kind of thinking like, if my book even makes it out to people at all, if I get one message from someone who picked it up, that will be enough. And that was what I really, really internalized as well. And so I think as we kind of hit publication, just every single thing that happened, I was like, oh my God, what is happening? Because it started to pick up traction online. It started to become one of the early book talk books, and people were talking about it and telling each other to pick it up. And so I think I had an idea as we were reaching publication that like, oh, there's a lot more buzz around this book than I expected. There's a lot more excitement for something that I was told early on would be a relatively hard sell because of the genre it sits in. It's a historical fantasy. It is, something that people actually have to sit down and like be prepared to get into that world with. And so I got the call in my dorm room. I was still in my was it my senior year or my junior year? It was my senior year. At Penn, and I was in my little dorm room. It was, dark out. The sun had set. The snow was around the apartment building. Everything was just quiet. And then my phone rings, and I knew then that it had hit the New York Times list, because if your editor calls you on the Wednesday, the week after your book is out, there can only be one reason. And it was truly mind-boggling. I still think about that time, and I can feel exactly what I was feeling at the time thinking back on it. I remember a Dua Lipa song was playing on my computer. That is just ingrained in my head. So it was truly a wild experience.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible. I love how like vividly you remember and can describe that time, because it's such like a dream come true. And I love what you said about, how despite the unfortunate circumstances of like stores being closed and, we couldn't shop or browse the way that we are used to and can now, how that book talk community online was so supportive, because I think we live as teens and of all ages really in such a fantastic time for like pursuing your dreams, because social media really lets you kind of get out of the bureaucracy a lot, and like you can, you know, if you have a good idea and you market it well, it can be successful even if, you know, people in the publishing industry don't see it that way. And so I think that that's just something that I hope anyone who's listening to this takes away, is like, if you have a big goal, whether it's writing a book or something totally different, like don't like, get creative, try it out, try promoting it online or in your community, however, because it might be more popular than you think at first.
Absolutely. I mean, we're living in a different time now. I think anyone who's, you know, I think Gen Z and Gen Alpha onward, we understand that the digital life almost comes first now. Digital life is as real life. And people who did not grow up with the internet around them can't quite put their minds around it in the same way of understanding, you know, there are, of course, the pitfalls to being too online, right? Like, we all need to live in the real world as much as possible. But the internet and technology, they all come with such huge changes in the ways that traditional industries have always worked. And we are really seeing the first appearances of that nowadays.
100%. And you found success before most people find confidence.
Oh, I love that phrase.
Right? I think it's true. Like, as teens and as young adults, it's all about like experimenting and trying new things.
Absolutely.
And you were already on such like an incredible trajectory from such a young age. So I'm curious, how did you handle that, and how did it affect you going forwards?
Oh, that is a great question. I'm actually like thinking now. I'm like, how did I do that? I think it's because I got started so early that I also learned how to grow a thick skin early. When I first started writing, I was 13, and I kind of just wanted people to read my work, regardless of whether they liked it or not, regardless of who it was. This website is a little less well known now, but back then Wattpad was super big. It was mostly known for fan fiction, but it was also a really great platform to put original fiction on there. And I thought, you know, why don't I just upload the things that I'm writing every time I have a new chapter? Let me put it on there and just see where it goes. And so I ended up with a lot of strangers reading my work, a lot of very, very kind strangers. I didn't really get many like weirdos, surprisingly. That's a big shock normally for anyone who knows Wattpad. That the comment section on Wattpad is like the Wild West, right? Like, we've all seen the screenshots. But I think I found myself in a really nice part of the internet where I was writing these you know, stories that I wanted to read. I had like paranormals, I had murder mysteries, I had epic fantasies, and people were following along chapter by chapter and giving feedback as I went. So it wasn't always like, oh, great chapter, upload soon, please. It would be things like, I wonder what would happen if this character like didn't do this in the next thing. I wonder what would happen. It was far more collaborative than I would ever be in the publishing industry. But I think to start out, when things are not serious, when things are very much just me learning, it was a really, really great space. And I think because I learned not to take myself too seriously when I was young, it meant that I kind of had a better gauge later on for when I should take myself seriously, for when I should step up and say, I do know what I'm talking about because I've done this for a few years now. I've done my training run, and now I've had the years of experience that, you know, you'd usually see in someone a little older, but I have done this even if I'm a little, you know, I could be a little mentally immature. That doesn't mean I don't professionally know how to do my job.
I love that so much, and I really think that it's a great way to show that, you know, as long as you're doing something, you're constantly writing and also reading. And what I also love is that third aspect of getting criticism, because I feel like you can only get so good at writing without having someone kind of look at your work and say, you know, there's kind of a plot hole here right now. I don't really know what's going on. And that way you can kind of say and take like a step back because you have that. And I also think it's really great because you learn how to take criticism so early on.
Like you said, growing that thick skin.
Exactly. Because that is, I think, a big problem that, you know, a lot of, not just teens, but everyone faces. it's hard
For
getting
sure.
criticism, definitely. And I loved your duology, These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends, which is based on Romeo and Juliet. What inspired you to pick Romeo and Juliet as an outline for your book?
It was honestly a bit of a lucky coincidence. Or more so, it was something that I wanted to outright embrace because when I initially had the idea for These Violent Delights, the elevator pitch was rival gangsters in a blood feud in 1920 Shanghai, because that was based on the real history at the time where the city was just being ruled by gangsters effectively. And I thought there was a really interesting story in there. And very specifically, I thought there's going to be two families, and the children are going to be star-crossed slash in love slash maybe they were once bitter exes and now something has pushed them back together. I had all these kind of threads of an idea. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought, I think I have too much overlap with Romeo and Juliet. I think it's very hard to look at a concept like blood feud and children of rival families and not think, oh, we're doing Romeo and Juliet, especially because the Leonardo DiCaprio movie is already out there and that's also gangsters. So the base concept wasn't anything new, right? And so I thought, well, you know what would make it new if it was a reimagining that embraces the heart of a very old concept in a completely new lens, in a way that we've never seen these characters before. And I was really lucky to have a fantastic English teacher in high school. Mr. Randall taught me from year 12 to 13, so my final years of high school. And he taught Shakespeare in a way that I felt like really gave the students this awareness for why Shakespeare has lasted this long. Like this, Shakespeare is not just some boring guy that we study in school because we have to. Shakespeare has so many relevant ideas and themes that explain why he has been taught for 400 years, despite back then during Elizabethan England, he was writing for fun. He was writing for entertainment. I think just having a great teacher like changes your trajectory sometimes. And I think I went into that class being like, oh, Shakespeare, whatever. And I left my time with him in English being like, I'm a freaking Shakespeare fanatic. Like, I love Shakespeare, things like that, right? So when I saw that this idea could be slotted into Romeo and Juliet, I felt like I could embrace the idea of a retelling and really do it justice for being in conversation with the original play.
That is so cool. I know what you mean because, I mean, I'm in my final year of high school and we're just doing Hamlet right now and I really enjoy it, but I know that a lot of my peers, they are not as interested, and I think it's interesting how the way that you view it and like what you like kind of look for beneath just the words and the actions of the characters really shapes kind of what you get out of the play or out of the experience of listening and reading to the play. And so I think it's really interesting how you kind of saw the parallels and melded it together into a new retelling, which has obviously really resonated with people, as it should. It's incredible. And something that I know we've heard you also incorporated in, as you mentioned, it was based in Shanghai. I know that you have shared before that you really put some of your own culture into your books, which I think is such a beautiful way to kind of put a piece of yourself into the world and into the characters. So which parts of your culture have you really inserted into that duology?
I feel like to write something set in 1920 Shanghai at all feels like I was pulling from every aspect of what I know about, you know, Shanghai as a city and also just people who are touched by that kind of upbringing at all. I wanted these characters to be especially close to me in a particular way where Juliet, the main character of These Violent Delights, she comes into the story at a point where she's been in New York for 4 years and she's newly back into the city. And the people around her are looking at her like, well, we know you were born here and you look like us, but you have been Americanized. And that was a really interesting experience to kind of write in what is essentially a diaspora experience for Juliet, where I think a lot of readers could probably relate in some way if they are immigrants into the US or in some way between with feet in two cultures. And for her experience, that meant I could write it in a way where I wasn't trying to claim authority on Shanghai or Shanghai culture, because I also was raised mostly outside of the city. My parents had taken me out from Shanghai to New Zealand when I was 2 years old. So I don't remember my infant days in Shanghai, but we would visit for holidays to go see relatives. And my understanding of everything comes a layer removed. And so Juliet gets that exact same experience. It's the fact that, I was able to incorporate language and her observations on how people talk to each other, how people translate for each other, but she is also observing at a distance, or things such as cultural practices that I have a different understanding of that would be from my parents, but my parents were right there with that cultural heritage. And so when Juliet is talking about, it's interesting that my family is doing this, but I'm more used to this, where it could be like really, really small things, like whether or not they say thank you out loud as the words, or if it's shown through actions and gestures, which is a more Chinese thing than the American way of just saying it outright. Those things then can become discussion points in the book that show you who these characters are without quite needing to say it explicitly. And I really love that I got to give Juliet that extra layer, because I felt like it would make it relatable to people who see that kind of distance themselves, especially in the US.
Wow, that is beautiful. I really like how, you took kind of something that you've experienced and that might have been not the most pleasant at certain times, feeling like you're in different cultures, or maybe you don't have the fullest grasp of your culture, and inserted it into a book that could help other people feel seen and related to. Because I know we spoke with Phil Rosenthal about like screenwriting and writing for a show, and he said that like most of his show, like Everybody Loves Raymond, is about, personal experiences that him and his team and his fellow co-workers experienced. And I'm like, that's similar to this. And I think it's interesting how sometimes when we see things we've struggled with, or maybe things that we love, or people who we engage with as, something bigger than just that one experience, we stay in that present moment, but then we also like take it back and say, what can I learn from this experience? And maybe if you're writing a book, you include that. Or if you're trying to start a business or have some sort of different goal in mind, you can include those experiences into that, or struggle points into a solution. I think that's a really interesting way to kind of reframe challenges in your life into something that actually like gives to you and to others.
That kind of pushes you forward instead.
Yes, that's a really good way to put it. I mean, I feel like with all the novelists I see around me, all the authors, that if a book encompasses something that feels especially emotionally hard-hitting, there is some thread of themselves that they put in there. And of course, it might not be one for one with their real lives, but when it comes to big and heavy themes, especially like grief or, loss, or even beneficial ones, even ones that are like love and celebration and family ties, a lot of times it feels like it's informed by how they've seen the world around them. And the more that people see the world around them, they go around, they live, that their art benefits from that.
Definitely. And I feel like a lot of the work that we create is often very much like a reflection of ourselves and the things that we've experienced.
Absolutely. Do you know someone who has a big goal? I think we all know someone, or a lot of people in my case, that have a goal. They have an ambition. Maybe they want to write a book, start a business, get into a certain university or college program, or even hit a certain goal in terms of physical training or fitness or sports. Whoever that person is in your life, think of them right now and send this episode to them. Chloe's formula for reaching your goals, no matter what age or stage of life you are at, is truly undeniable. And I think everyone needs to hear how they can reach their goals and feel happy and joy-filled along the way. So send this episode link out now as a little gift and a little small bit of happiness to this person, and let's get back into the episode.
You know, you spoken earlier that you lived in Shanghai for a little bit and then you moved, but you still came back and you were still pretty immersed in your culture a little bit. And so, since you were so immersed in this from a young age, what are some principles or lessons that you still hold close to your heart?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. What are some principles I still hold close? I would say that I, even if I've been removed from, actually living in Shanghai, there's a lot that I wanted to explore, in these books, in the entire Secret Shanghai universe at large, of just, I think, principles that I inherit from the people that raise me more so than the environment that I'm around. Because, even though I grew up in New Zealand, my home life was still entirely influenced by my parents. And so it would be in certain, I feel like this is probably global, the idea of like who do you go to when times are tough? Like, are your family should be around with you, your family should be forever in how you are going forward with life and the fact that the support system exists, or in just like, I think there are certain elements of what do you owe the people around you, and how do you appreciate the world around you in that way. I feel like with, especially in the way that my parents raised me, it was very, you should aim to be the best if you are able to reach that point in yourself. You're not competing with people around you, you're competing with yourself. You should do the best that you could possibly do. And I don't know if this was something that I was aware of that my parents instilled in me until I kind of was talking to people around me as I was getting older in high school. But so I don't know how much the listeners will know about New Zealand, but New Zealand, and I think maybe Australia too, we have this term called tall poppy syndrome, which is this idea that if you grow a little bit too high from the rest of the field of poppies, your head gets hacked off. You should aim to stay with everyone else. You should aim to be just like everyone else. Like, aim for 7 out of 10. Don't aim for 10 out of 10. This is kind of a cultural thing that emerges when you're a small country and you kind of want to stay a tight knit community. But it is very oppositional, I think, to this idea of like American greatness, or like a lot of like major countries. Like, I think it's very Chinese too, this idea of like you should aim to be the best. That is something that as I was growing up I realized was at odds with everything around me. And now that I've moved to the US, it honestly feels like it's more normalized here to just go for it, to just do what you want to do.
Wow, I had never heard of that concept. We're based in Canada,
Yeah.
and so here I feel like it's much the same as like try your best. Always
Definitely.
like try to
Put your best foot
Put your
forward.
best foot forward, and I like that like notion of like competing with your best self versus external wise. But I think it's interesting how in New Zealand your experience growing up was so different from the Western, I guess, kind of point of view on that. I think that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting on how you mentioned that it's so different also because of how much smaller it is. And I never really considered that even that population size and the fact that maybe it's like an island, same with Australia, is that you feel the need to kind of be a lot closer with everyone else and you don't want to really disrupt anything.
Absolutely.
I always tell my American friends that they will get cultural whiplash when they go to New Zealand. You wouldn't think it, right? Like, I think, Australia, New Zealand, US, Canada, UK, you think we all kind of are just like the same culturally, but it is actually interesting the differences that happen when you are a bit more isolated.
It's so true, absolutely. And back to kind of the topic of your novels, they span a striking range from the fantasy retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and now to a futuristic cyberpunk thriller, Coldwire, which we are very excited about. Where do you find inspiration for diverse worlds and genres?
I feel like my schooling probably plays a big aspect in this. So in high school, I was very interested in history. I was very interested in just exploring what has happened before in, recent human history, and how these stories almost feel timeless in a way because they are always going to be, you know, we as humans have been the same for hundreds and thousands of years. We're motivated by the same things. We want the same things. We go to war for the same outcome time and time again, right? And in high school, I was kind of leading up to a point of conceptualizing These Violent Delights, then conceptualizing Fair Lady Fortune as the spin-off. And those books are very concerned with, you know, national identity and who you are in your society, in your place, what do you owe them, who are you going to become as you are coming of age into your own person. Um, a lot of these I think are just informed by my desire to want to write um, the past, different settings, describe the atmosphere, like capture and really try to pull what really existed into my own story and see how realistic I can make that world feel. And in a very similar way, Coldwire kind of emerged as I was doing my international relations degree in college. Um, I was very fascinated by this idea of it's the technical term, I guess, would be the idea of bilateral relations, meaning how are two countries talking to each other? How are two countries affecting each other and the society around them? There was that existing as a concept, and I kind of looked around the books that I had read before that was futuristic, dystopian in some way, and I noticed that they tended to usually tell a story about one government and what it's doing to its people. If we think about major examples like, you know, the Hunger Games, I think a really funny thing people always bring up is like, what's happening outside of Panem? Like, is Panem the only dystopian country, or is Australia in this world too? And they're just doing fine, like across the ocean, right? Like, that's a fascinating, as much as people joke about that, that's a fascinating idea to me. And as I was moving into the space of, I really want to write something cyberpunk, I really want to capture this like neon city technologically soaked feeling, and I was thinking about the story, about how I'm going to examine virtual reality and identity in that way. I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to use everything I've learned in my international relations degree and really explore not only my cast of characters and how they're going through life, but how bilateral relations between these two warring countries are affecting them, how their indecision of where they belong and who they are in this world is completely from a top level of the people in government making these decisions affecting the little guys running around every day.
That is so fascinating. And I just want to say, I think it's so interesting on how you studied international relations as well as not just doing writing or creative writing, because I think it's such a great way that once you kind of know something that you're good at and something that you're interested in, then you can kind of also branch off so that you can get new ideas and new inspiration. Because I feel like oftentimes once we kind of master a craft almost, it's great to diversify and kind of learn as much as we can. And I think that's really fascinating.
And I love
very
how,
cool.
while your books are so, like, they're fantasy novels that are, like, really, really well written into their fantasy worlds, they still are very much based on those, like, root experiences or issues that we have in our own daily world. Yeah, 100%.
And speaking of Coldwire, can you share anything with our audience as a teaser?
Ooh, as a teaser, okay. I will say, I think Coldwire is the most fun I've had with plotting in a while. When you open Coldwire, you will notice that there are two point of views. There's Ireli and there's Leah, who are two main characters in quite different storylines. So Ireli is going through her storyline in Downcountry, which is physical reality. So in the world of Coldwire, because most of society now lives in virtual reality, they call that upcountry. And when you are just regularly in the real world, you're not plugged in, that's downcountry. Ireli's in downcountry outrunning a government conspiracy, and Leah is a cadet in her final year at the academy, and she's in upcountry the entire time. She's in virtual reality. And I always really love books that have two split casts of characters that you don't quite understand how they interweave with each other until you suddenly do, until that moment happens and you're like, that's how they're going to meet. And I had so much fun working with that concept in this book. I really loved the early reactions to that. So, in saying that, I'm really, really excited to see what people think about it.
I love that. I think it's really cool because it's almost like a version of like the invisible string theory, like that you're like connected to someone and you don't exactly know how. And I like that because it's like you're kind of observing how everything's kind of weaved together, even if you don't really know how.
Exactly.
Readers on the edge of their seat being like, okay, where is it gonna cross?
Exactly.
Exactly. And starting a new book, Chloe, and project, I imagine, must feel like a lot. And so I'm curious, does it feel like a lot to you? And what are your tips for anyone listening for managing feelings of overwhelm and not getting paralyzed?
Oh, that is a great question. Starting a new project definitely feels like a lot. Whenever you have stepped into a whole new sandbox, it's terrifying because all the structures are gone. I spent 4 books and 2 novellas playing in the same world, and I had, the same kind of rules to work by. I had characters that crossed over. I had a writing tone, like a voice that I'd already been honing for a very long time. So when I did start Coldwire, there was definitely a steep learning curve because as exciting as it is to have that open sandbox again and to be able to do anything you want, that is also a terrifying concept. And as you say, paralyzing sometimes. And so for me, and as advice for people who, find themselves starting a new project, who find themselves just maybe trying to start at all and not knowing how to do it, it is really, really important to internalize this idea that your first draft does not need to be perfect. Matter of fact, your first draft can be the furthest thing from perfection ever. It could be the worst piece of work anyone in this world has ever written. Doesn't matter. No one even has to see it, but it just has to exist. Because you can fix what exists. You can look at the words you put on a page and figure out, how do I make this better? But you can't fix a blank page. If there's nothing there at all, you can't improve it, you can't work with it, you need to get it down completely. Though, also that being said, it is hard to get everything down completely. So then we go all the way back to the start of this episode when we were talking about it is so much easier to do it one section at a time, one page at a time, one paragraph at a time, even one line at a time, and then eventually you're there. You have some structures to the sandbox.
I love that
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
fantastic. I love this saying, or not saying, I guess it's more so this idea of like, if you knew that it was going to take 20 drafts or 50 no's to get to your goal or get to being published, wouldn't you do it? And it's like, exactly, every draft, every rejection brings you closer to that, and you just have to have faith that if you keep switching and pivoting and editing and taking feedback, you will get to that goal. And I think it applies beyond writing a book. If it's like an athletic goal, or maybe it's an academic goal, it's all about breaking it down into something that you can actually achieve, because otherwise you get in that paralysis where it's like, I'm scared to, like, I don't even know where to begin. This seems like so much work, so I'll just leave it for another day.
For sure. I mean, I almost feel like I picked up a lot of these habits from academia. I remember, when I had to get started on a big project, and the first thing I would do is to just draw like a very basic plan. Like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, and everything that comes in between can be ignored, but just get that skeleton down first, and then you've got it. You've got a roadmap.
I love that so much. And I'm really wondering, because I love all of the characters that you've developed. I mean, they're so well done and they're so complex, and you can really see where all of their actions and thoughts and feelings are coming from. How do you go about developing these really complex characters?
Oh, that's a great question. It takes several drafts. I find that when I am first starting a book, I think this was a line I wrote to my editor when I turned in Coldwire. I was like, here's my first draft. I'm so sorry that these characters are all just talking sticks. I'm aware that they have no personality right now. I promise I will fix it. So for me, it is always a work in progress until the very end when it's done. But up until that point, these characters still have the room to grow and to figure out who they are. They're no different to us in a way. It feels like when I first put them down on the initial draft, they're like newly born babies, you know, they're blank slates. Whatever the story demands of them, they kind of take on, they see how that fits. And as time goes on, it feels like I get to know my characters better as well. As I put them through, as I move them like set pieces from point A to point B, I start to realize, what is it that you want? What is it that you find most important in this world? What is it that you would be so scared of losing? What is it that you would sacrifice anything for? Those kinds of big questions I start to answer for myself as these characters are interacting with their surroundings. And as I go through many drafts, I start to gather the ability to talk as them, if that makes sense. I learn what they want, and I am able to develop that voice for how that would show in their actions, in their dialogue. And hopefully by the time we're reaching like the third or fourth draft, when we're really nailing down the details, those characters sound like distinct people because I've learned who they are.
It's so interesting because it kind of goes back to what you were saying about just being able to move one page at a time, one paragraph or scene or action at a time, because that's how you get to know your plot, your characters better and better. And it's not about rushing to the finish line. It's about kind of taking your time getting there.
Absolutely.
And I'm so curious. You've written so many different types of characters and stories and plots. What's your advice for others on how we can push ourselves to become that kind of better version of ourselves in a healthy way?
Oh, that is a great question. This is something that I try to work on every day too. I'm like, how do I become a better version of myself and not just, oh, well, I'm comfortable here. Like, I just have to do what I'm doing right now. And that's totally fine. Um, I would say, I would say, try to be honest about what you want and try to be honest about what you are capable of doing in this present time. It's about setting realistic goals, right? Like this goes the same for character building as it does for self-realization in real life. Where you are currently standing, what is the best that you are capable of being? And then what is the best that you are capable of being today? Because I think sometimes we get paralyzed by thinking about all the like massive miles that we have to go before we hit that ultimate point. But it doesn't need to be that every day. It can also just be a day by day activity of there are these things that I know that I can do right now to feel good, to be better around my community, around my family, around my friends, all of that. And how do I do just that for now to make larger strides over time? So living life is just like novel writing, guys.
I love it. I love that metaphor. And it's so true. Like, know what do I want and what can I do to get there today? Like, breaking it down into something actionable so that we don't feel too crazy overwhelmed.
Absolutely, just like baby steps.
Sure. Exactly.
And going back to college, you were essentially juggling two full-time jobs, two full-time roles, a student and a novelist, which is crazy. How did you manage your time and energy back then? And what about self-care? For others, what is your advice for anyone to be able to balance schoolwork with pursuing something they're really passionate about?
Or just a regular job if they're not in school?
That is a great question because sometimes I look back on my time in college and I'm like, how did I do that? Looking back now, because I do it full time now. Like, writing is all I do. I don't have to juggle schoolwork on top of it. And I feel so busy every day just with my writing. And so truly, I think back on that year and I was like, oh my God, like I must have been time traveling some days because there's no way. But I do think when you are pushed into situations where you are juggling a lot and when you really, really want something, I think most people are a lot more capable than they even think of themselves. I think when they find themselves in that situation and they want both things, so, in the instances of being in school and doing something at the same time, like when you do want those things a lot, you are capable of doing those things. Don't talk yourself out of it before it starts because you don't know what you are capable of until you are in that situation. I also highly swear by having a really good calendar. Have an agenda. Have somewhere that you have every single thing that you need to do that day, that week, that month. Because it saved my life multiple times just to have everything written out. And I could see, like, oh, in a week I have an assignment due. And I need to tell my publisher that this edit schedule doesn't work for me. And it's so much better for people in your life, in your work, in your academic career to communicate ahead of time. Because, in your young adult life, you will find that people are a lot more forgiving because there's no such thing as like a really, really hard deadline unless, there are external circumstances involved. But professors are willing to give extensions, publishers are willing to give extensions, your tutors are willing to work around you, your agent knows what's going on in your life. And people are just a lot more accommodating than I think we think of when we're in high school, when one like late assignment is like, okay, that's not okay. But I think once you go into college, university, and then work after, people are like happy to work with you. So for me specifically, calendar work, very, very important. But then I also I needed to prioritize, I think. Um if I tried to have my cake and eat it too, sometimes I would find that I was going to bed at 3 a.m. and then getting up at 8 a.m. to go to class. It was not sustainable. So sometimes I would need to choose, do I want to go to dinner with my friend or do I want to finish this chapter? Do I want to get a head start on this reading or do I want to go to this club meeting? And sometimes your social life might struggle while you're juggling, essentially something you want to do during college and college itself. Sometimes you will find that you're slower than other people trying to do this extra thing on top of things if you're also trying to maintain your social life. And it will always be, you're always going to be juggling in the air. But if you keep your time, if you keep your time as your own, if you just keep a good eye forward, it is doable, but it's not without sacrifice. And I think that's okay.
Absolutely. And I love how you mentioned that because I feel like oftentimes, like you said, we want to have our cake and eat it too.
We want everything
Exactly.
at once.
But unfortunately, and I think it's really nice that you mentioned that, sometimes you have to pick, do you want to, finish this chapter or do you want to go out with friends? And it's totally okay if you do want to go out with friends, but it's also okay if you want to finish your chapter. It's really, if you've been grinding it out all week and you've been writing a ton, it's totally okay to spend a Saturday night out with some friends, hanging out, maybe going shopping, and taking a break. There's no crime in that.
And I love what you said, Chloe, about, sometimes your social life might struggle a little bit, or then maybe you're going to find yourself less involved in extracurriculars or clubs or other parts of like the high school experience or the college experience or any experience. Or maybe you're going to be prioritizing that and just want to pursue your career ambitions later on. Like it's a balance and a choice. But I really appreciate how you said that because I think sometimes when as teens or young adults, we look at people we look up to, maybe it's an author or an athlete or a celebrity, we're like, wow, they really have got it all. I think it's important to realize that like everyone who is like a bestseller at 21, that also comes with some give and take. And just to know that, right? It's not just like someone's super, super lucky and has everything and then we don't. It's about choices and effort.
Absolutely, yes. When we peel the curtain back on anyone who feels like they've made it in some way, there are definitely those elements behind it, for sure.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a bit about your incredible online community. I know we talked about you going viral on Book Talk, but you've got quite a lot of followers online by just being your authentic self. And that also means attracting like your followers and people who really align with you. And I guess in that sense, kind of not attracting the people who are not interested in your genre or in your writing as much, and have built a really lovely community in that way. So what are your top tips, Chloe, for others to stay true to themselves and avoid people pleasing?
Oh, that is a great question. That is something that I have also been working on over the years, right? It is quite hard to stay authentic online, actually. It's harder than you would think. Because again, we've talked about how technology comes with really great perks, but of course it also comes with the pitfalls. Like we right now are very much beholden to the algorithms, right? Like social media feeds kind of decide what people want to see. And the more that you post, the more that you realize there are certain things that will always pick up steam, like rage bait and clickbait and all of that, right? Like that is probably the easiest way to make it online, but it's not a very good long-term way to make it online. So I think for me and for anyone who genuinely wants to build a community as opposed to just having followers, it is about deciding what you want to put out there and being willing to stand by it, being willing to be defined by that, right? So I always think about this anytime I'm posting about my books or posting about whatever I have coming up recently, and I'm trying to portray it in the most accurate way I can. It is sometimes a battle of how do I make sure that this gets in front of people in a way that is still true to my work, to my ethics, but how do I try to battle the algorithm all the same? And sometimes it can mean giving a little, taking a little. It can mean I'll use these trending topics. I will try to, get in front of people in that way, but I still need to be able to stand by it. I can't outright lie about what's going to be in my books. I can't try to sell it in a way that's not true to it, because then ultimately people are going to pick it up based on that and they're going to feel disappointed. And you don't want to create that reaction. So I do think it's about how do you juggle the balance of being online in general, being beholden to our tech overlords, and phrasing things, hashtagging things in a way that might seem a little, your soul might be like, oh, I don't want to hashtag, that's cringy, but sometimes you have to get in front of people, but you still need to do it in a way that you feel like you can stand behind when people are like, I'm going to understand this as who you are and how I want to engage with your work. And you have to be like, yes, like this is what I write, this is what I want you to read, and you can join me and talk about it if you like that.
Yeah. I love that so much. It's really, I think it's definitely hard. Mercedes and I know we have our social media and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle, but I think just really focusing on putting, what you believe is best and what really represents yourself, but at the same time, trying to fight that battle of how to actually get eyes on it.
I really do think, though, it applies to real life as well beyond the screen, because if you want to attract the friendships or the relationships that, are actually sustainable in the long term, rather than just like a face you put on when you're around people because you want to be cool or fit in with a certain group, you really need to also lead with your values and lead with who you are, rather than, oh, well, I'm going to say I like to do that even though I really don't, because you're not going to end up being friends with those people for very long.
For sure. That is it's a really good equivalent. It's like how you will feel so comfortable around the friends that you truly feel like you are yourself in front of. But if there are some friends that you've made because you've put on a persona, you will feel uncomfortable that entire time. That will show in the way that you're interacting through life.
Totally. And we have a little game planned out that we wanted to do. But before that, I just want to ask you a quick question that I'm really curious about. And that is, because you're so young and you've already achieved so much incredible success, where do you see your career going over the next few years or decades?
That is a great question. I hope that I can always be telling stories in some way. It is the concept of having achieved success at a young age is something that is, I am so grateful for. It is also very scary, because there will always be that idea of like, well, can I ever reach another peak? Can I keep it going in a way, or am I just going to plateau at a certain point? And I mean, that would be terrible. I never want to reach a point of like creative plateau. I want to keep changing and exploring and innovating what I'm doing. And so I think about it as the moment I feel as though I've run out of things to say in a certain category, I want to expand. So whether it means that I want to be writing in more genres, whether it means I want to be writing in different mediums, it could be anything. I would love to start screenwriting one day. I would love to go into other modes of how do we tell a compelling story about humanity and society, because that's what all of it is at the heart of it. I'm grateful that I'm not there yet. I think I still have a lot to say in this space that I've started in. Um, 5 years feels like a long time, but it kind of just goes by like that. I'm like, I don't even know if I've done everything that I can do in this time. So I have, more to do in this space, but I think as the years and the decades go on, I just want to keep writing, however it looks like.
That's amazing. And I really love how you just love storytelling so much. I think that's so beautiful.
Exactly. And we're excited to follow along. And maybe one day we'll watch a movie written by you.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. Love that.
I have been able to sleep so much better as of lately because of using the amazing Waking Up meditation app. It has completely transformed the way I sleep, plus how I think about meditation, since it has so many great explanations about how it works and the science behind it.
Sign up for Waking Up using the link in our show notes and save $30 off your first annual subscription. Now let's get back into the episode. And now we have a fun little game that we put together to get to know you better and also learn in kind of a rapid fire way what brings you happiness. So it's called the Joy Edit, kind of in relation to books. So the first up we've got the plot twist of happiness. So the idea is each prompt is a little plot twist moment and you respond with how you would find joy or meaning in it. So first up, you wake up in 1920s Shanghai with no memory. What is the first thing you would do to feel happy?
Eat food. Because the food has been good for 100 years. It is still really good, but I think especially back then, if you just wander out into the streets and get something off a stall, oh my God, it would be so delicious.
I bet.
What would you grab?
Oh, that is a great question. Probably one of those breakfast pancakes. It's like an egg-based pancake. They'll pour it over a huge like flat thing and they'll scrape it into a circle and then they wrap like crunchy crunch, I don't even know, crunchy chips and like meat and like cilantro, and they'll just pack it into a little it's like a wrap almost, but it's called a pancake. It's delicious.
That
sounds fantastic.
I want to try one.
Absolutely. And now your latest book, Coldwire, suddenly becomes real life and you're the main character. What's the first thing that would make you smile or laugh?
See, this is a hard one because Coldwire is a dystopian and we're not actually that far off from the future it imagines. It's, the kind of tyranny and conspiracy that I can easily see happening in our real life. So I only have to really think about my current life now. I'm like, what would make me smile if I suddenly woke up in that world? Oh my God, I know. I would ride a motorbike in virtual reality because I can't get hurt. And that would be so fun.
I like
That's
that.
smart.
I like that a lot. I would do the same thing. So yourself today and your 13-year-old self when you first got into writing are in the same room. What do they both agree brings them joy and makes them happy?
Oh my God. They would both agree that the future me, I would be telling the 13-year-old me, I would be like, we get to meet all of our favorite authors, truly all of them. Like, every single author that 13-year-old Chloe is reading and loving and just completely idolizing, future me gets to be on panels with them and do events with them, moderate events with them, chat to them on Instagram and just be like, hi, I loved your latest book. It would blow like 13-year-old me's mind. And as we're talking about it, I think it would be such a happy experience for me to kind of, reassure the inner child, the 13-year-old, and the 13-year-old would just be over the moon, just jumping up and down.
Absolutely.
That is amazing. And who was 13-year-old Chloe's favorite author?
Okay, Cassandra Clare, who blurbed for Our Lady Fortune, who I've had the absolute pleasure of sitting on panels with now and like talking about how much like the Shadowhunters universe changed my life. Marie Lu, who also blurbed Coldwire, and her Legend series was so instrumental to my like teenage years. Her Warcross series, like in my late teenage years, like absolutely like stunning. People like, Laini Taylor, Maggie Stiefvater, I've had the pleasure of interacting with them online and just like, on that level, we're colleagues and I'm being professional, but deep down under, I'm like, twirling my hair, kicking my feet, being like, oh, I love you guys.
Aw,
That
I
is
love
absolutely
that.
amazing.
That's incredible. So now we're heading into our second part of the game called Book Talk Rapid Fire Joy Edition. So this is just like a fun, high energy lightning round to get to know you a little bit better. So what is a song that boosts your mood instantly?
Oh, great question. Welcome to New York by Taylor Swift. 1989 as an album entirely, pop perfection. So that being the opening track, you know.
I agree.
I love that so much. And who is a character that you would love to grab a bubble tea with?
Orion from the Foul Lady Fortune series. He would be the perfect bubble tea partner, I think. I don't know how to explain it really. It's just the vibes.
Absolutely,
I love it.
I get it.
And what is a book you've read recently that makes you just feel good and happy while you read it?
Ooh, I recently read, I read a lot of angsty books, so this is a hard question. Um, how long ago was this? So I don't know how recently I read this, but Tashi Bouillon is one of my close friends. She writes YA contemporary. All her books truly feel like joy, like packaged up in a 300-page story to me. She is so good at writing characters who, it's not always sunshine and rainbows for those characters. They definitely go through hard things. They have to make hard decisions. But at the end of the day, her books are about finding joy, choosing happiness, choosing the life you want to live. And the last one that she came out with was I'll Pretend You're Mine. It's like imagine like an Olivia Rodrigo, Louis Partridge type relationship if they started as like PR to kind of like fix a relationship and then they're like fall in love for real, It's that vibe. It was so good. And everything that she writes is it fits that prompt.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
And yeah.
my favorite question is, what are you having for dinner tonight?
My boyfriend and I make this thing called Big Salad. It's when we kind of just want to throw ingredients together and we just want to toss something up that's like really like hearty and healthy but easy. And it's tomato, cucumber, kale, rotisserie chicken that we just pick up from the nearest grocery store, apple, like a lemon drizzle, balsamic vinegar, a bunch of herbs, burrata, cashews, and then you just shake the whole thing and it's really delicious.
That
That
sounds
sounds fantastic.
You've got so many good different food ideas. I love it. That sounds great.
I'm glad.
And now we have a little question that we like to ask everyone that comes on our podcast, a few quick ones. The first one is, what is a piece of advice you wish you could give to your teenage self?
I wish I could tell my teenage self that in order to create, in order to write anything, or just to have something interesting to tell, you need to live life. You need to get out there, talk to people, see your friends, see your family, meet strangers entirely, because as much as writing or any type of storytelling, whether it's just being interesting as a person, having something to say, that requires having seen the world. It requires just having gone through your day in a very normal but adventurous kind of way. And I say that because I think when I was younger, and especially, not when I was young, but when I was younger in the kind of like 19-year-old, 20-year-old space, and I was really trying to get started into this career, I would have moments of thinking like, it's really important in writing to just sit down and spend time doing it and, plant your butt at your desk and get it done. As much as that advice does hold very well for, finishing something, you can't do that every day, every week, because you will run out of things to say. You will run out of like creative energy in the well. You need to get out there and to refresh it. And I hope that I've learned that lesson now as I'm older, but if I sat down with my younger self, it would be kind of like, you can get out there. It's okay.
Yeah, downtime is such an essential part of the process. Like, whether it's, going to make sure you're getting enough sleep at night, or, just going for a hike, going for a walk, getting out, going to the library, whatever it is, like, that's such an important part of being happy and being motivated.
I love that. Refresh the well.
Yes.
Exactly.
And what is something that you do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Pet my cat. My cat is so fluffy. He's not here right now. I think he's in the bed sleeping because he's a lazy bum. But he's so incredibly fluffy. When he lays down, sometimes he'll have so much fluff that he looks like he has a lion's mane. And so every day to get started, I just hover over him and I just pet his tiny little head.
Aw,
that's so cute.
That's adorable. And finally, do you have a motivational quote you love and remember? And if you do, why?
I feel like it all surrounds the same sentiment. I definitely got the well metaphor from someone. The idea of refilling your creative well. I love that phrase. I mean, I just said it earlier, right? I love that phrase. I think it really, really speaks true because art is not something that you can just pull out of yourself on an empty well. It has to refill over time.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And I know you've got Coldwire coming up. Where can our audience find out about Coldwire, pick it up, as well as just follow you if they want to keep up?
Yes, so I'm on most socials as at the Chloe Gong, Instagram, TikTok, etc. You can also find me on my website, www.thechloegong.com. And Coldwire is available wherever books are sold. Look for it's a very neon cover. I love it a lot. You look for the giant cover in blue neon that says Coldwire. I'm so excited for people to read it.
Well, I know that Mercedes and I cannot wait to pick it up.
Sounds incredible. And speaking with you today was incredible, Chloe. Thank you so much for all your time and all of your insights and advice. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This has been such a joy. Great questions. So that's the only reason why I can give these insights.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, and thank you so much to Chloe for joining us today.
She is such an incredible author. If you have not read her books yet, you definitely should check them out. They're so well written. Anastasia, what was one of your biggest takeaways?
I think my biggest takeaway is that we need to, get out there and have experiences, because it can be so easy for us if we just want to work on our passion, just to lock ourselves in our room and stay inside all day. What we really need is to talk to people and, be inspired by the world around us, because that's the best way to refill that creative well, which I love how she phrased it.
Absolutely. One of my biggest takeaways is the importance of breaking down your goals. Whatever your goal is, break it down into small steps. What do you want the end result to look like, and what can you do today to get yourself closer to that end result, and what can you do in the next few days, weeks, or months to get to that end point. I think that's such a great way to not get paralyzed and overwhelmed.
Definitely.
If you enjoyed this conversation, we think you would love our interview with another best-selling author, Lauren Roberts. Lauren Roberts takes us through how you can be more self-disciplined, reduce self-doubt, as well as her hacks for choosing positivity if you receive criticism or harsh feedback. From self-publishing in your bedroom to international book tours, what moment, Lauren, made you stop and think, wow, is this real?
Actually, when I saw my first negative video, it was like...
You can listen to our conversation with Lauren now. It's linked in the show notes.
If you enjoyed this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, please consider leaving us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out. We really appreciate it. And it helps let other people know that this is a great podcast to listen to. See you next time.